Coming to New York City after spending 21 years in small towns in Ohio can obviously hold a lot of surprises. Here in New York, there are buildings taller than 5 stories. There's mostly functional public transit. But between New York and Ohio, the difference that has interested me the most has been the contrast in LGBTQ plus culture. Of course, Ohio is a pretty conservative state, so I'm lucky to live on a very supportive college campus, and I've found a lot of community online. But my hometown doesn't have a single gay bar, let alone queer organizations and museums and theaters and parks and neighborhoods. So I desperately wanted to use some of my time here to research some history and take in some queer sites. June 28th, 1969. Police conduct a raid on a mafia-owned bar in Greenwich Village, a common occurrence in this place and time where being queer, even dancing with someone of the same sex, is illegal. The police often raid gay bars to arrest a few unlucky gays, lesbians, drag queens, and trans people who weren't aware of the coming raid and call it a night. But on this day, things were different. When the Stonewall Inn was raided on that late night in June, people fought back. Seeing their comrades beginning to put up a fight, more and more people in the bar began to push against the police until it became a full uprising, spilling out into the streets as the cops tried to get control and more queers in the surrounding area joining the cause. The Stonewall Riots, as they're called, continued for a few more nights, gays finally pushing against cops, walking around openly in Greenwich Village and Christopher Street, doing what was necessary to further the fight for gay liberation. Stonewall definitely wasn't the first act of protest or retaliation from the LGBTQ plus community, but it was certainly a catalyst for gays today to have the rights and pride that we currently do in many parts of the country. Particularly in New York, there's very little shame around being gay. New York City is a place of great history, culture, and community for people who identify as queer. In fact, dedicated on June 24th, 2016, by President Barack Obama, the Stonewall National Monument was the first, and is still currently the only, national park that honors the LGBTQ+ community. The Stonewall National Monument. It includes the Stonewall Inn, Christopher Street Park, and the surrounding areas to Waverly Street and Greenwich Avenue. Within Christopher Street Park is the unassuming gay liberation statue, cast by George Segal in 1980 and installed years later after the beginning of the AIDS crisis in 1992. When he was commissioned, Segal was told that his artwork here had to be loving and caring and show the affection that is the hallmark of gay people. Covered in plaster and flat white paint, these statues take on natural poses, looking like any other park goer, wearing contemporary clothes and holding casual contact, simply existing. Also, near the heart of Greenwich Village lies the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender Community Center, or the Center, which provides services and events for queer folks in New York. The center houses meetings for support groups, youth activities, counseling and legal services, lectures, performances, and more. It contains a library, coffee shop, computer lab, and a bookstore called the Borough of General Services Queer Division. In the past, the center organized meetings for groups like GLAAD, Queer Nation, and ACT UP, many of which were prominent actors throughout the AIDS crisis. Additionally, only half a block away from the center is the AIDS Memorial Park at St. Vincent's Triangle, which sits at the physical epicenter of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. If you walk directly west on Christopher Street, away from Stonewall, you'll soon find yourself at Pier 45, or the Christopher Street Pier, in Hudson River Park. The area around Piers 45 and 51 has a long history with the queer community. Eventually, in the wake of the AIDS crisis, it became more of a home to unhoused, queer, and trans non-binary youth and people of color, including figures like Marsha P. Johnson, whose body was found in the Hudson River in 1992. Since the early 2000s, the piers have undergone a lot of gentrification and erasure of community. But they still maintain memorials dedicated to queer history, like this one, erected after the Orlando Pulse shooting in 2016. Additionally, near the Williamsburg area of Brooklyn, there's a park on the waterfront dedicated to Marsha Pay It No Mind Johnson. This area is complete with seasonal food stalls, a beach with a beautiful view of Manhattan, and signs all over the park that educate visitors about transgender history in America. The Leslie Lohman Museum of Art is one of the only museums in the world that is dedicated solely to the LGBTQ+ experience and to queer art. It's located in Soho and opened in the 2000s, although its art collection began in the 70s. This museum hosts over 25,000 objects and art pieces and has 2 distinct rooms for public exhibitions throughout the year. Currently on view at the museum is Soft Spaces, which features works by alumni of the Leslie Lohman Museum of Art Fellowship, as well as a collection of art titled I'm 1,000 Different People, Everyone is Real, and the installation A Promise of Lightning by Andrea Geyer. Being able to visit a queer museum like this was especially meaningful to me as a queer creative. Obviously, I've always known that there's plenty of gay art out there in the world, but being able to see such a vast collection in person is entirely different from scrolling through Tumblr or Instagram looking for art. It's truly been a pleasure and an honor to explore these sites of queer history and culture. Not only have I been able to spend this entire semester exploring New York with my friends, seeing Broadway shows, being my real self, but I've also gotten the chance to research gay liberation and film and interact with all these unique places in this city.